At 33 years old, I built a data system that processed 400 million transactions a day across 9 states. But at my brother's wedding, standing next to his bride's multimillionaire father, he pointed at me in front of 200 guests and said, "This is our family failure." My parents backed him up like they'd been rehearsing it for years. Then the billionaire looked at me, went completely still, and said 5 words that cracked the whole night wide open. What happened next cost my brother his company, cost my parents their retirement, and finally gave me permission to stop shrinking. If you love watching toxic families get served cold justice, hit that like button and subscribe to the Payback Vault because this story gets vicious. Let me take you back to where this disaster actually started. My name is Meredith Fischer, and I'm the daughter my parents don't brag about. Not because I failed, but because my success is quiet. At Heon Systems, I was a senior data systems architect. I designed Cascade, a real-time orchestration engine that handles routing for banks, hospitals, and logistics companies across the entire southeastern United States. If you've ever swiped a debit card at a grocery store in Georgia or Florida, my code touched that transaction. But do you think my family knows that? Nope. My mother tells people I do computer things. My brother Liam calls me the cautionary tale. And my father, he just looks at the floor whenever my name comes up. That was my life. Invisible, competent, and starving for a crumb of respect I was never going to get. 6 weeks before the wedding, I was sitting in my Charlotte apartment eating cold leftover soup when my phone buzzed. It was the Fisher Fam Chatta group chat I had been removed from 3 weeks earlier. Nobody told me I was kicked out. The notification badge just disappeared one day, and I pretended it didn't hurt. But now they added me back, not to apologize, not to check on me. My brother Liam had typed, "Are you coming or not? Don't make it weird. Don't make it weird." That was his version of a warm invitation. My mother followed up immediately. "Meredith, please just confirm. Sienna's family is very particular about headcounts. Not we miss you. Not it wouldn't be the same without you. Just logistics. Just a head count." I looked at my cold soup and realized I was worth less to them than a chair at the dinner table. Here is the ugly truth about the Fisher family. We had one success story, and it was never me. It was Liam. Liam dropped out of a business program to launch Vidia, a data intelligence startup that raised $11 million and landed on 3 companies to watch lists before he turned 30. My parents pulled $140,000 from their retirement savings to fund his Series A shortfall. 31 years of my father's pension contributions and my mother's overtime, pay converted into equity in a company my brother ran and my mother narrated like a reality TV show. Meanwhile, I was the one who actually knew how to build the technology he was selling. But nobody asked. Nobody ever asked. Because in my family, the person who talks the loudest gets the love. And the person who actually does the work gets the silence. The last time I went home for dinner was in January. My mother had invited the Pattersons from next door. Nice retired people who asked polite questions. Mrs. Patterson asked what I did for work. Before I could open my mouth, my mother waved her hand like she was swatting a fly. "Oh, Meredith does computer things, databases or something." Then she turned to Mrs. Patterson with a smile she'd been rehearsing for years, and said, "We don't brag about her." She said it like it was a household policy. Like keeping me small was a point of pride. My father studied his pot roast. Liam leaned back in his leased Audi and grinned. The rest of dinner was all about Vidia. My mother recited his accomplishments like scripture, and I just sat there, eating my pot roast, swallowing the message that I would never be enough in that house. That was the night I stopped expecting anything from them, but I hadn't stopped carrying the weight yet. That part came later. Here is the part of the story my family doesn't want you to hear. 4 years ago, Liam was drowning. He had pitched investors on a proprietary real-time data engine that didn't exist. What he had was a pitch deck, a leased office, and a demo that ran on a spreadsheet macro. He called me at 11 o'clock at night, something he only does when he needs something. "I just need the core module," he said, "something that works for the demo. I'll hire a real team after the round closes. I'll pay you 10 grand. I'll give you a architect credit." And like the loyal, desperate for approval sister I was, I said yes. I spent 3 weeks building a functional prototype from scratch. I wrote it on my personal laptop after midnight, on weekends, entirely outside my employment agreement at Heon. I used my own methodology, my own naming conventions, my own logic patterns. I built my brother's company with my own 2 hands while he slept. Liam paid me $1,500 of the $10,000 he promised. The co-architect credit never appeared. And 14 months later, when Vidia launched its public product page, I saw my own work staring back at me. Same architecture, same module structure, same variable names in the API documentation. He had renamed the modules and changed the color scheme on the dashboard, but the bones were mine. He called it innovation. I called it theft. But I didn't say anything. I didn't call a lawyer. I didn't call the investors. I closed the tab, filed the consulting agreement in a blue folder, and shoved it in the bottom drawer of my desk. Why didn't I fight? Because I knew what would happen. My mother would call me jealous. My father would go silent. And Liam would flash that grin and say, "Family helps family." Right. So I swallowed it. I kept building my quiet systems, and I let my brother wear my coat while telling everyone he bought it in Milan. That blue folder lived under a stack of old tax returns and a router manual I no longer needed. Inside it was everything. The printed consulting agreement with Liam's signature, the commit log showing 47 commits over 21 days, all authored by M. Fischer, the 3-page architecture spec with my handwriting in the margins, and the email from Liam sent at 2 in the morning that said, "Can you just make the demo work? I'll handle the rest." That email was the last honest thing my brother ever wrote to me. I didn't keep the folder as a weapon. I kept it because I keep records of everything. It's the same instinct that makes me back up my files in 3 locations. But sitting in my quiet apartment, running my thumb across that blue tape, I realized something. That folder wasn't just evidence. It was the only proof that I had existed in my brother's story at all. And one day, someone was going to ask for it. 3 weeks before the wedding, Vidia was everywhere. Liam landed a feature in a regional tech publication called The Quiet Disruptor. I read it on my phone during a code review. The article.
Here is the part of the story my family doesn't want you to hear. 4 years ago, Liam was drowning. He had pitched investors on a proprietary real-time data engine that didn't exist. What he had was a pitch deck, a leased office, and a demo that ran on a spreadsheet macro. He called me at 11 o'clock at night, something he only does when he needs something. "I just need the core module," he said, "something that works for the demo. I'll hire a real team after the round closes. I'll pay you 10 grand. I'll give you a co-architect credit." And like the loyal, desperate for approval sister I was, I said yes. I spent 3 weeks building a functional prototype from scratch. I wrote it on my personal laptop after midnight, on weekends, entirely outside my employment agreement at Hyon. I used my own methodology, my own naming conventions, my own logic patterns. I built my brother's company with my own 2 hands while he slept. Liam paid me $1,500 of the $10,000 he promised. The co-architect credit never appeared. And 14 months later, when Vidia launched its public product page, I saw my own work staring back at me. Same architecture, same module structure, same variable names in the API documentation. He had renamed the modules and changed the color scheme on the dashboard, but the bones were mine. He called it innovation. I called it theft. But I didn't say anything. I didn't call a lawyer. I didn't call the investors. I closed the tab, filed the consulting agreement in a blue folder, and shoved it in the bottom drawer of my desk. Why didn't I fight? Because I knew what would happen. My mother would call me jealous. My father would go silent, and Liam would flash that grin and say, "Family helps family, right?" So I swallowed it. I kept building my quiet systems, and I let my brother wear my coat while telling everyone he bought it in Milan. That blue folder lived under a stack of old tax returns and a router manual I no longer needed. Inside it was everything. The printed consulting agreement with Liam's signature, the commit log showing 47 commits over 21 days, all authored by M. Fischer, the 3-page architecture spec with my handwriting in the margins, and the email from Liam sent at 2 in the morning that said, "Can you just make the demo work? I'll handle the rest." That email was the last honest thing my brother ever wrote to me. I didn't keep the folder as a weapon. I kept it because I keep records of everything. It's the same instinct that makes me back up my files in 3 locations. But sitting in my quiet apartment, running my thumb across that blue tape, I realized something. That folder wasn't just evidence. It was the only proof that I had existed in my brother's story at all. And one day, someone was going to ask for it. 3 weeks before the wedding, Vidia was everywhere. Liam landed a feature in a regional tech publication called The Quiet Disruptor. I read it on my phone during a code review. The article described Vidia's proprietary real-time intelligence engine as a paradigm shift. The technical quotes they attributed to Liam were almost word for word from the spec I had written. Then I read the next sentence. Vidia is in advanced discussions with Callaway Ventures for a significant Series A round. Callaway Ventures, that's Gerald Callaway's fund. The same Gerald Callaway whose portfolio companies already used my Cascade infrastructure at Hion. The irony was so thick I could taste it. My brother was about to take my code to my own client, and he had no idea. Because in his mind, I was just the computer thing's sister. I wasn't a threat. I wasn't even a person. I was a footnote. And that blindness was about to cost him everything. 10 days before the wedding, the Fischer fam chat lit up again. Liam was asking me to review some technical documentation for a quick meeting. He didn't say it was with Callaway Ventures. He didn't have to. I opened the 6-page technical summary he sent. The scalability projections were fabricated, the throughput numbers were inflated by a factor of 3, and the section labeled Proprietary Innovation described a load distribution algorithm that I had published in a Hion white paper 2 years earlier. He wasn't just borrowing my code anymore. He was building an entire fraudulent narrative on top of it. And he needed me to proofread the lie before he handed it to his fiancé's father. I closed the document. I did not reply. That was the first time I stopped helping. Not because I wanted revenge, because I was finally too tired to keep carrying a man who had spent his whole life standing on my shoulders and calling himself tall. Then came the LinkedIn message that changed everything. A senior technical analyst from Callaway Ventures named Devin Pratt reached out. The note was professional, neutral, and devastating. Ms. Fischer, during our code review of a portfolio candidate, we identified architectural patterns that closely align with your published work on Cascade. We would appreciate the opportunity to discuss provenance and authorship of certain foundational components. They had found me, not because I told them, not because I sent the blue folder, because my work has a fingerprint and Liam was too arrogant to think anyone would look. I read that message 3 times. My hands didn't shake. Years of reading diagnostics under pressure had given me steady nerves, but my heart was pounding because I knew exactly what answering that message would do to my family. And for the first time in my life, I didn't care. I spent 2 days thinking about that message. Not because the answer was complicated. The answer was simple. Yes, I wrote the code. Here are the records. The hard part was the math. If I confirmed authorship, Callaway's due diligence would flag Vidia's IP provenance as unresolved. That wasn't a speed bump. That was a wall. The investment would collapse. Liam's company, the one my parents had staked their retirement on, the one my mother recited like scripture, would face scrutiny it couldn't survive. And everyone would blame me. My mother would say I did it out of jealousy. My father would go silent in that way that feels worse than shouting. Liam would tell anyone who listened that his sister sabotaged him. I sat at my desk for a long time. Then I opened a text file and typed a sentence I didn't send to anyone. I will not lie about my own work. That was it. That was the whole decision. I wasn't going to volunteer a confession. But if someone asked me a direct question about code I had written, I was going to tell the truth. I replied to Devin Pratt. I said I was available Thursday. The rehearsal dinner was held at a vineyard 40 minutes outside Charlotte. White tablecloths, string lights, a calligrapher for the place cards. I found my name at a table near the kitchen door, wedged between a second cousin I'd met once and a college friend of Sienna's who spent the whole evening on her phone. Liam sat at the head table with the Callaways. My parents sat one table over, close enough to orbit, far enough to earn. When introductions went around, Liam stood up and worked the crowd like a politician. He introduced his parents with warmth. He introduced Sienna's family with reverence. Then he got to me. And this is my sister Meredith. She works with computers. A polite ripple of smiles. One man at a corner table, gray hair, wire-rimmed glasses, tilted his head when he heard my name. Not a reaction exactly. More like recognition catching on a snag. I didn't know it then, but that man was Gerald Callaway's lead technical advisor, and he had already seen my name on the due diligence report. After dinner, that man passed my table. He stopped. "Meredith Fischer," I nodded. "I think I saw your name on a pipeline architecture panel in Atlanta. Scalable orchestration?" I nodded again. He smiled, small, knowing, and walked away. I never got his name, but someone in that room had recognized mine, and for a reason that had nothing to do with Liam. On the drive home, I put the pieces together. Liam didn't invite me because he wanted me there. He invited me because he needed Gerald Callaway to see a complete family, a normal family, a family that showed up, smiled, and didn't say anything inconvenient. But more than that, he needed me to be small, visibly, publicly, undeniably small. Because if Meredith Fischer ever came up in conversation with Gerald Callaway's technical team, Liam needed the room's memory of me to be a quiet woman at a back table who works with computers, a nobody, a family footnote, a cautionary tale. That was the strategy, and it was about to backfire so hard it shattered glass. The wedding was held at Callaway Estate, 22 acres of rolling lawn, a stone manor house, and a reception hall with marble floors and ceilings high enough to make you feel like you'd been miniaturized. A string quartet played Debussy near the entrance. Champagne flutes stood at attention on silver trays. Everything about the setting announced money that had been around long enough to stop announcing itself. I arrived at 4 o'clock wearing a navy dress I'd bought 2 years ago for a conference I ended up skipping. Simple, clean lines. No jewelry except a watch my grandmother gave me. My mother would have preferred I wore something that faded further into the background. I chose the dress because it was mine, and I liked it, and I was done dressing for her comfort. The ceremony was brief and beautiful. Sienna looked luminous. Liam looked like a man who had rehearsed his tears. I sat 4 rows back between strangers, and I waited. The reception began at 6. Tables were arranged in concentric arcs around a dance floor. My seat was at the outer ring, table 11, near a side exit and a potted fern. Liam had assigned my placement personally. He told me this with a smile when he found me holding a glass of water near the bar. "You're at 11. It's a great table. You can see the whole room." Translation: I could be seen by nobody. He took my elbow lightly, performatively, and began walking me through the crowd. "This is my sister. She's in IT. Meredith. She's the quiet one. Family's bookworm. Never leaves her desk." Each introduction was a small, precise cut, friendly enough to pass for humor, sharp enough to draw blood. My parents trailed behind us. My mother smiled and nodded. My father looked at his shoes. When Sienna's mother asked what I did, my mother jumped in before I could answer. "She's in tech support, I think. Something like that." I let it land. I let all of it land. But when Liam squeezed my arm and leaned in to whisper, "See? Nobody cares. Just relax," I pulled my arm free. "You can introduce me," I said quietly. "You don't get to script me." Gerald Callaway entered the reception at 6:30. He had been taking photographs with the wedding party, and his arrival shifted the energy in the room the way a current shifts the surface of a lake. Subtle, total. He was taller than I expected, gray at the temples. He wore his suit like it owed him nothing. He didn't smile reflexively. He read the room before the room read him. Sienna kissed his cheek and brought him to a table where my parents were already seated, champagne in hand, performing their best version of a family with nothing to hide. Liam was magnetic in that moment, standing taller, speaking louder, telling a story about Vidia's latest partnership that I happened to know was still in the letter of intent stage. Gerald listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't nod along. He just watched Liam the way an engineer watches a system under load, looking for where the strain would show. And then he saw me. Liam spotted me near the bar, and his eyes lit up, not with affection, but with utility. "Dad, come here. You haven't met my sister yet." He said it to Gerald, but it was aimed at me. He reached out and pulled me toward the circle the way you'd pull a suitcase off a carousel. Functional, graceless, purposeful. Gerald turned. My mother straightened in her chair. My father set down his champagne glass, and Liam, grinning so wide his molars caught the overhead light, positioned me in front of the man whose fund was about to make or break his entire company. Liam had one hand on my shoulder and the other holding a champagne flute. He turned to Gerald with the grin, the one that was half charm and half armor, and said it clearly enough for the surrounding tables to hear. "This is our family failure." He laughed. The kind of laugh designed to give other people permission to laugh too. A few guests obliged. My mother, seated 3 feet away, tipped her glass slightly and added her signature line, the one she had tested at dinner tables and church functions and neighborhood barbecues, until it had the smooth delivery of a campaign slogan. "We don't brag about her." She said it to Gerald's wife, Patricia, who smiled politely. She said it the way she always said it, as a kindness, as modesty, as a mother who simply had one child worth discussing and one she kept in the margins. My father looked at his plate. Liam squeezed my shoulder. I stood still. I didn't flinch. I didn't smile. I didn't perform the role I'd been assigned. The good-natured sister who absorbs the joke, who plays along, who makes the golden child shine brighter by standing in his shadow. I stood with my back straight and my hands at my sides and my face absolutely neutral. 33 years of being the punchline, and I was finished laughing on cue. Gerald Callaway had not spoken. He had watched Liam deliver the line. He had watched my mother add hers. And now he turned slowly, the way someone turns when they're recalculating everything they thought they knew about the room they're standing in, and looked directly at me. Not at Liam, not at my parents, at me. His expression changed, not dramatically, not with a gasp or a double take. His brow drew together. His lips pressed thin. He went completely still. And then he spoke, quietly, but the string quartet had paused between movements, and his voice carried further than he probably intended. "So," he said, "it's you." 2 sentences. That's all it took to tilt the room. Liam's grin froze. My mother set down her champagne glass. Patricia Callaway looked at her husband with an expression that said she had seen this particular stillness before and knew what it preceded. "I'm sorry," Liam said. His smile had detached from the rest of his face. "Do you two know each other?" Gerald didn't look at Liam. He was still looking at me. "Mia Fischer," he said. Not a question, a confirmation. "Cascade, High-On Systems." I nodded. "Yes." "Your architecture runs in 11 of my portfolio companies." 12, I said. "MedSync migrated to Cascade in January." Gerald's jaw tightened. Not with anger, but with something closer to the expression of a man who has just realized the math he's been running has a variable he missed. "Devon's report flagged the provenance issue last week," he said, almost to himself. "I assumed the M. Fisher in the authorship records was a former contractor, or a coincidence." He looked at Liam, then back at me. "You're his sister?" "Yes. And you built the foundational modules that Vidia's engine is based on." I didn't hesitate. I didn't soften it. I didn't dress it up or add caveats to protect anyone's feelings. "I wrote the original architecture. The consulting agreement is dated 4 years ago. The commit history is mine." The room had gotten very quiet, not silent. There was still the clink of glasses somewhere, still the murmur of guests who hadn't noticed. But the circle around us, Liam, my parents, Patricia, Gerald, and me, had become its own atmosphere. Liam moved first. He stepped between me and Gerald, his body language shifting from charming host to cornered animal in the space of a breath. "Okay, hold on. She's exaggerating. She helped with an early prototype. That's it. Everything Vidia is today, the engine, the product, the platform, that's my team, my vision. She wrote a few lines of code 4 years ago." He looked at Gerald with a version of the grin that had stopped working. "You know how it is. Family members always think they contributed more than they did." Gerald tilted his head. "The module architecture in your engine matches Cascade's published design patterns at a structural level. Can you explain the load distribution algorithm in your core pipeline?" Liam blinked. "My technical team handles the specifics. I'm the CEO." Gerald said, not unkindly, just precisely. "It's a weighted round robin with adaptive latency thresholds. Your documentation says it's proprietary. Can you describe how it works?" Liam opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again, and said nothing. My mother stood up from her chair. "Gerald, this is a wedding. This isn't the time for Diane," my father said quietly. It was the first word he'd spoken in 20 minutes. She stopped. Gerald looked at me again. "Miss Fischer, I'm going to ask you something directly." I met his eyes. "Go ahead." "Is the core engine of Vidia your original work?" "Yes," I said, the way I would answer a technical question in a code review. Clearly, specifically, without emotion. "The core engine of Vidia is based on a data routing prototype I built over 3 weeks 4 years ago. The architecture follows a design spec I wrote myself. The commit history is entirely mine. I signed a consulting agreement with my brother which he did not honor. No payment in full, no co-architect credit. The code was never formally assigned to Vidia. I built it on my own time, on my own equipment, outside the scope of my high-on employment agreement. The IP was never transferred. I wasn't performing. I wasn't dramatic. I was answering a direct question with documented facts. That was the only weapon I'd ever needed. Liam's face went red. You're doing this here, at my wedding? You asked me to come, I said. I came. You introduced me to your investor. He asked me a question. I answered it. You planned this. I didn't plan anything. I don't lie about my own work. Not for anyone. Liam turned to Gerald. She's bitter. Look, this is a family issue. Whatever she thinks The IP was never assigned, Gerald said, cutting him off with the gentle finality of a man who had spent 30 years reading contracts. If the core architecture isn't owned by the company, the investment can't proceed. This isn't personal. It's due diligence. My mother's face had gone the color of chalk. My father was looking at me, not with anger, but with something that might have been the first stage of understanding. And Liam was unraveling. He turned to the display table near the entrance, the one with the guest book, the champagne tower, and the glass trophy. The Rising Founder Award from the Triad Business Journal. He grabbed it. His hands were shaking, and it slipped. The trophy hit the marble floor and shattered into 1,000 pieces. The word founder was still readable on one of the larger fragments. Sienna stopped walking. She stood in the middle of the dance floor, her dress pooled around her feet, staring at the man she was supposed to marry that afternoon. And the look on her face wasn't anger, it was recalibration, the same expression I'd seen on Gerald's face minutes before, the expression of someone running the numbers again and arriving at a different total. My mother broke first, not with tears, but with strategy. She crossed the floor toward Gerald, heels clicking on marble, and did what she had always done. She tried to renegotiate reality. Gerald, please, this is a family matter. Meredith has always had issues. She's jealous. She doesn't understand business. Mrs. Fischer, Gerald said, your daughter's architecture is licensed by my fund. Her published work is referenced in 3 industry white papers. The system she designed handles more daily transactions than any product in my current portfolio. I don't know what she is in your family, but in my industry, she is one of the most respected infrastructure architects in the Southeast. My mother's mouth opened, closed. She looked at me, and for one fraction of a second, I saw something behind the performance. Fear. The pure, uncut terror of a woman who had spent 30 years constructing a story about who her children were, and had just heard a stranger dismantle it with facts she couldn't argue with. The fallout didn't happen all at once. It arrived in packets, like data. Callaway Ventures formally withdrew from Vidia's Series A within 72 hours. The stated reason was neutral, unresolved IP provenance, but in the industry, neutral language is its own kind of verdict. 2 other investors pulled back within a week. The regional tech publication that had profiled Liam as the quiet disruptor ran a follow-up that was significantly less flattering. Vidia didn't collapse overnight. These things rarely do. But the scaffolding was gone, and what remained was a company without clean ownership of its core technology, without its lead investor, and without the narrative that had been holding it together. The wedding was postponed. Sienna moved back into her parents' estate. I don't know whether she and Liam spoke after that night. That wasn't my business to track. In the Fischer fam chat, the one I'd been removed from, added back to, and never once genuinely included in, my father sent a message for the first time that had nothing to do with Liam. Are you doing all right, Mir? My mother wrote nothing for 3 days. Then, You could have told us, I replied once. I'm open to talking when the conversation starts with respect, not before. Nobody responded. That was fine. I wasn't waiting for an answer. I was setting a boundary, the kind I should have set a decade earlier. My father pulled me aside near the coat room before I left the reception. His tie was loosened. His eyes were wet. The retirement money, he said. We put in $140,000, your mother and I. We believed him, I nodded. I know. Is it gone? I don't know, Dad. That depends on what Vidia has left without the Callaway round. He leaned against the wall. He looked old. Older than 62? Older than a man should look at his son's wedding. And for a moment, I felt something I hadn't expected. Grief. Not for what Liam had done to me, for what my parents had done to themselves. My mother appeared at the end of the hallway. She walked toward me with the particular urgency of a woman who has just lost control of a situation and is looking for someone to contain. Meredith, you need to fix this. I didn't break it, Mom. You didn't have to come here. You told me to come? Liam told me to come. You added me back to the group chat so I could confirm my attendance at an event where my job was to stand still and be small. Her eyes flickered. Something beneath the armor, just for a heartbeat. I just wanted one thing to be proud of, she said. Her voice cracked. It was the most honest sentence she had ever spoken to me. Then she straightened her shoulders. You should have stayed quiet. You owed us that. The moment was gone. The wall was back up. I turned and walked toward the exit.